Happy Thursday. Welcome to the briefing room, coming to you from the Washington Bureau of ABC News. I'm John Santucci. We have a jam-packed show, and our bureau's a little abuzz right now. You'll figure out why in a couple minutes or so. But we're going to start where we were watching our focus yesterday, and that is the markets. Take a look at the big board right now. Stocks have rebounded from where we were yesterday, 800 points down at the closing bell on Wednesday, right now leveling off. That comes on the heels of where we may or may not be going as we are watching for any possible indicators of a recession ahead. We're going to keep our eyes on that and have all the latest view right now up online at abcnews.com. But we do begin with a growing story. What is happening between President Trump, members of the squad, and Benjamin Netanyahu? So two members of the squad, Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, wanted to go on a codel over to Israel, something every member of Congress at some point has done. However, President Trump putting pressure on the scenario and getting his allies in Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, have jumped in and said, guess what? You can't come now. Let's dive into this. This is a crazy story. It is still developing. We have heard just about from every 2020 candidate on this topic. We're joined right now by our entire team. Jordan Phelps over at the White House monitoring for us. We also are joined by Gil Hoffman. He's the chief political correspondent at the Jerusalem Post. And Rabbi Avi Alitsky. He is the senior rabbi at Bethel Synagogue in St. Louis Park, Minnesota. And he, of course, serves in the area where Congressman Ilhan Omar represents. Great to have all three of you join us. Let me start first with you, Gil, because this statement from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is something we've really never seen before. Let's put it up on screen for our viewers to follow along with me. It reads in part, Congressman Tlaib and Omar are leading activists in promoting boycott legislation against Israel in the U.S. Congress. Only a few days ago, we received their visitation plan, and it became clear that they were planning a campaign whose sole purpose was to strengthen the boycott and negate Israel's legitimacy. For example, they defined their visit destination as Palestine rather than Israel. The statement goes on to say that is why the Interior Minister decided to not allow their visit, and I, as Prime Minister, backed that decision. Gil, something we've never seen at all. I mean, I can't imagine you've seen something like that in Israel.
Absolutely not. Now, I'm here to explain the decision of the government as a journalist not to endorse it in any way. There has never been an American official blocked from entering Israel. America has done that to Israeli officials before. And what happened was, as Netanyahu wrote in his statement, when they received the itinerary, they saw that the congresswomen weren't going to be meeting with any Israeli officials in any capacity, even those who oppose the Israeli government. This was not a trip to Israel the way the 70 Democrats and Republicans came over the last 2 weeks. This was a trip to Palestine. This was a trip that, from the point of view of the government, violated a law that was passed in Israel that bans those who are actively trying to harm the Jewish state from coming in. And there are such laws in Western nations all over the world.
Okay, let's bring the rabbi into this conversation, because Rabbi Alitsky, you just put up an op-ed about this very topic. You've been very vocal in the past when President Trump has minced words with Congressman Omar. Your op-ed reads in part, those who look to the Hebrew Bible for inspiration, guidance, and meaning in their life may be surprised to learn the most repeated commandment in the Torah is to welcome the stranger. That is clearly what has not happened here.
Correct. And I just want to say a quick hello to Gil. We go way back, and he's been a scholar in residence here at our synagogue, so it's nice to share the airtime with him. So thank you for having me. I would say not only is this not what's happening here, but members of Congress are unique. They should always be given the opportunity to experience the vibrant democracy that is Israel. And even if the itinerary was spending its time in its Palestinian territories, they still have to make their way through Israel to get there, interfacing and pressing the flesh and having conversations with Israelis. And that's an important part of the dialogue.
And let's take a listen to what Congressman Omar said. We have her statement as well. She wrote in part, "It's an affront to the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu under pressure from President Trump would deny entry to representatives of the U.S. government. Trump's Muslim ban is what Israel is implementing, this time against two duly elected members of Congress." Let's bring Jordan Phelps into the conversation at the White House. Obviously, Jordan, you and I both know a very close relationship between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. Do we know what, if any, conversations the White House was having with the Israeli government on this?
Well, John, the White House insists that President Trump wasn't influencing Prime Minister Netanyahu on this decision. But of course, even if that's true, that the president wasn't exerting any influence behind the scenes, he certainly was making his opinion clear on Twitter. Just this morning, he was saying that it would show great weakness for Israel to allow them in. And as you know, John, these two men are closest of close. This is one of the president's closest friends on the global stage, Prime Minister Netanyahu. And so the two of them both are bound together politically. We know Netanyahu has an election of his own coming up not too long from now, and the two play off of that relationship to benefit one another. And the president obviously offered Benjamin Netanyahu the clearest of endorsements before his recent election, and so, you know, the two are staying close together in just another example here, John.
And Gil, let me go back to you on that, because Jordan mentions right there, obviously the Prime Minister had a very tough re-election just recently. The support and the relationship between him and President Trump, how does that play over in Israel at the moment?
That is the issue from Netanyahu's point of view in this election. His party headquarters has a massive 20-story poster of a picture of Netanyahu and Trump together with the headline, "Netanyahu in another league." And so when the President of the United States writes on social media that Netanyahu would be weak if he would permit these two congresswomen to come in, he really had no choice. Netanyahu's campaign slogan last election was that he's strong, so he can't afford to be weak with an election 1 month away.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds like they're completely in line. The other question I had for you, Gil, just going back to what you said a little earlier, you mentioned the trip by 70 members of Congress just a couple weeks ago, Republicans and Democrats, that they had met with officials. But that's not something that has to happen on these trips. It doesn't mean that a member of Congress has to go to a country and has to have official meetings with members of the government necessarily.
But to go to a country and only meet with the people who want to harm the country, that is something that congresswomen don't do. That is unprecedented. So you can say that what Israel was doing here was unprecedented, and you could say what these congresswomen were doing was unprecedented as well. And I don't think that a lot of countries in the world would like what they tried to do.
Well, we're definitely going to be watching that. Rabbi, let me go to you before we have to move on. You know, you've come on this program many, many times. I know you have, and spoken about the Congresswoman, your close relationship with her. I'm curious, though, did you know that she was going to be making this trip?
I didn't know, and there were a limited few of us who had a conversation last week with her office and with the Congresswoman talking about the trip, and she was gauging suggestions of what should be on the itinerary, with whom she might be able to meet, where to make the connection. And although we haven't seen the final itinerary, we were hopeful from the dialogue and the discussion. What I would also add, just to piggyback on Gil's comments,
yep.
You know, the kind of anti-peace BDS movement, that's very troubling. It's disturbing and something we should speak out against. Support for a one-state solution instead of two states. That's a path not towards peace. That's a path towards, really, I think, calamity. But both of those issues aside, we're still talking about two members of Congress that should be welcomed into the country. And this is a different conversation than private citizens. These are elected officials that, even if we disagree with their positions, they still implicitly represent plenty of friends of Israel. And so that's a very disturbing conversation.
and one that we're certainly watching play out right now from all of the 2020 candidates, as I mentioned. Rabbi, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it. And Gil Huffman with the Jerusalem Post, thank you both as well. Jordan, stay with me because we are going to switch gears and talk about what's coming up tonight. President Trump back on the campaign trail for a Keep America Great rally. That is the new slogan he has employed for his 2020 campaign. Also on the phone with us right now, our Trump Campaign 2020 embedded reporter, Will Steeken, who's outside the arena where the president is going to take the stage at 7 o'clock tonight. Will, I hear there's a crowd out there, but not as big as the crowds as you've seen in some of the redder states in the country.
Yeah, that's right, John. I would say I got here about 9 a.m. to survey kind of what the line and what the crowd looked like. And, there's probably about maybe 30 or so people in line. I've been to some Trump rallies where, overnight there's hundreds of people in line. So, but you are dealing with a blue state. And so I would imagine the Trump campaign would argue that they're kind of coming into maybe a little bit of enemy territory here.
For sure. And Jordan Phelps over at the White House, we know one of the topics the president is most likely going to touch in some way, shape, or form tonight is the economy after that disastrous day on Wall Street yesterday. Any sense of what we're getting from the White House as to how he's going to try to spin this tonight? Because as you and I have said multiple times, the economy is the issue that he and his team are campaigning on going into this re-elect.
Well, John, we certainly know what direction the president intends to go because he's been tweeting about it over the last few days. The president, of course, not taking any direct responsibility and said he's blaming the Fed for not keeping interest rates lower. And he's also now taking aim at the media, another one of his favorite targets, saying that the media is doing everything they can to crash the economy, he says, because they think that will be bad for me and my reelection. So the president obviously doesn't want to take any personal responsibility for this, John, but as we saw, the president blinked for the first time earlier this week when he said he would be delaying that extra threatened $300 billion in tariffs on China, saying most of the goods that would be subject to those tariffs will be delayed until December 15th. The president's first real acknowledgement that this trade war is having a real impact on U.S. consumers.
Yeah, delaying those 10% tariffs. That's right, Jordan. And another topic that we know coming back into the fall that this White House is going to have to deal with, they've already said they're dealing with it, is gun control. Will, I want to bring you back in for that because you told me earlier that you've been talking to some of the voters that have been online waiting for the president's rally tonight. What sense are you getting from New Hampshire supporters of the president? How do they feel about what the president could or could not do as it comes to gun control?
That's right, John. Well, while there's definitely a lot of energy here, a lot of support, when I would bring up, I talked about over a dozen supporters here in line in New Hampshire, and when I would bring up possible gun control measures that the president has been seemingly floating, there's been a lot of trepidation, a lot of worry that, I had one supporter tell me, quote, it's going to hurt him if he were to push for gun control. Others saying, I think gun control would be a bad thing if you were to push for this and heading into 2020. And so I think this is something that is very meaningful here in New Hampshire, obviously, and it's something that the president, I know the White House and the campaign are both looking at. If this is maybe something they want to push moving forward into 2020, John.
You're going to be watching that. And Jordan Phelps, the other thing we could be watching for tonight, potentially a new candidate for the Senate entering the race. There are rumors about that Corey Lewandowski, President Trump's first campaign manager, is exploring a potential run for the U.S. Senate seat from New Hampshire. What do we know right now?
Well, John, what we do know is that Lewandowski is going to be meeting President Trump along with his family at the airport when he arrives in New Hampshire this evening, and he'll be taking a ride with him over in that motorcade to the rally site. So if there were ever an opportunity for a surprise announcement, this isn't a bad venue, John.
Not at all. And Jordan, you and I both know from our coverage of the 2015 and 16 campaign, Lewandowski in New Hampshire was the president's man after the president lost the Iowa caucuses. He is the one that the president credited, in part, with bringing New Hampshire home for the commander-in-chief.
Yeah, absolutely. And these two men go way back, John, as you know. The president hasn't offered a direct endorsement, but he said of Lewandowski just today to a New Hampshire radio station that if he were to run, he thinks he'd be great for the job. So we'll see if anything more formal comes of that this evening.
Jordan Phelps at the White House and Will Steeken up in New Hampshire. Thank you both very much. We will have full coverage of President Trump's rally rally tonight right here on ABC News Live beginning at 7 p.m. approximately. They never start on time. We're going to switch gears, though. A horrible story that we do need to talk about here. We are seeing a rise in suicides among the nation's most important group of individuals, and that is our law enforcement. We learned overnight another officer died by suicide in New York. That is now 9 officers for the start of this year. It brings the number across the country right now, you can see the numbers up on your screen, to over 120 deaths so far just in this year. It is a crazy, crazy story, and we're going to dive into it right now. We're joined right now by Luke Barr. He's a member of our justice team right here. And on the phone at the moment, we're joined by Sheriff Tim Wickham from upstate New York that has had to deal with this himself and travels the country lecturing about this important topic. Great to have both of you with us right now. Luke, let me start with you because we were going through the numbers earlier. They are just staggering.
Yeah, John, they are staggering, and it's a real problem. I talked to law enforcement across the country that have said it's a problem, and it's only going to get worse. Right now, as of August 1, they're up 24% since last year. And just last week in Virginia, 3 law enforcement officers took their life. So it's a real problem. It's an epidemic.
And it's happening all over the country. Yep. And let's bring the sheriff in on this conversation. And Sheriff, I've learned a little bit about your story. You dealt with this, I'm sure prior to this, but 10 years ago, your best friend took his own life.
Yeah, certainly 10 years ago this month, August 18th, 2009, 9:03 a.m., I received a text message from one of my best friends who was our sheriff at that time, Dennis John, advising me of what he was going to do and where he was. That day he died, I made sheriff, and part of my crusade for the last decade has been to trying to prevent this from happening on anybody else's watch. It is my belief that what we need to do is have a culture change, specifically addressing post-traumatic stress disorder and its incident rate in law enforcement. It's been a long time. Our subculture has facilitated that if you have an injury that's emotional or psychological, that you put duct tape on it and you don't talk about it. And that's a mistake, because post-traumatic stress disorder is the only disorder in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM-5. Out of 297, it's the only one that's caused by exposure, and it's the only one that's 100% manageable. The reason it's 100% manageable is because it's an injury. Ironically, if one of our officers breaks their leg, we know exactly how to take care of them to get them back to full duty. But if that injury is emotional or psychological, all of a sudden we get hinky, and the officers are stereotyped, and they don't reach out for help because they're a fear of consequences or persecution within the agency or inability to promote. And we need to make those stereotypes go away.
And Luke, you've been studying the numbers from around the country. What are we seeing from different law enforcement organizations in different jurisdictions right now? What are they trying to do for their officers?
Well, some departments are different, John. You know, some departments are really progressive and are trying to provide mental health training, counseling, and some aren't. And there's real stigma with this in the law enforcement community, as he said, and it's really growing, and it's only going to get worse. So law enforcement officers and agencies around the country are trying to prevent it. But as one Justice Department official told me, there's a stigma, and if you smash that stigma, you will save lives.
And Sheriff, back to you, though, on this, because one of the things that you've done since your friend's passing, you've been traveling the country as a part of the Talk to Me Post Tour. Talk to me about that. What are you doing when you are going and speaking to some of your colleagues in law enforcement?
Well, it's my belief, first off, that there's an administrative culture change that needs to happen. The very minute that you put brass on your collar or stripes on your sleeve in our culture, part of your mission now becomes to protect and serve those that have chosen to protect and serve. And there are actually 2 great programs that are emerging out of New York State right now. One is New York LEAP, which is sponsored by Tommy Shevlin and Jimmy Banish. And the other one is Talk to Me Post Tour, which I am a board member of. Feel free to investigate it yourself. TTMP.com, TalkToMePostTour.com. And it is the advantage of Talk to Me Post Tour. It is the only anonymous program that exists to help law enforcement. It is completely anonymous, and it is done through social media, online, in a virtual tunnel that camouflages the user's IP address. So if I were to enter it and speak to another specifically trained peer officer, which is what officers need, because cops will talk to other cops. They understand each other. The reason my lectures are so very successful is because I spent 12 years on our tactical team. I spent 7 years working major crime. I spent 3 years working midnights. I have street credibility with the officers that I speak to. I don't have fancy letters after my name, PhD or MD, but they will listen to other cops. Talk to Me Post Tour is specially trained law enforcement officers that are waiting online for officers to enter the system and talk to them. It's not mental health therapy, it's debriefing. But if you need therapy, they have the resources to send those officers. And these officers can reach out and get their engine checked without any fear of repercussion or persecution within their agency, because their agency have no idea that they've reached out.
Sheriff, thank you so very much. I truly appreciate it. As you said, that just the relatability that you're able to have with the officers there is really important.
Real quickly, I would just like to add. Very quickly, I would just like to add, any of you that do go and investigate, talktomeposttour.com. Please investigate the entire website. They are currently aggressively pursuing grant money, and they are also doing some private fundraising with some great people like Raul Felder, who care about first responders.
Well, thank you, sir. And we have up online right now the National Suicide Hotline for anyone that you know needs help. That number is a great resource, and we do hope that you will use it. Sheriff, thank you very much. Luke Barr, thank you very much. Sure. We are going to switch gears here in the briefing room to another story we have been following on the 2020 campaign trail in part, and that is what's going on in Newark, New Jersey right now. There is a growing water crisis right now, bottled water having to be brought in, and this does relate in part to what went on with the Newark Water Commission during the term of former Newark Mayor, now U.S. Senator from New Jersey, Cory Booker. Our team has been looking into that. I'm joined right now by my colleague, Luke Brueggemann, who had been working on this story for the last several weeks. So, Luke, obviously, Cory Booker is not the mayor of Newark now, but nevertheless, it is still, because he is on the campaign trail, raised questions about what he did with this commission during his time as the mayor of Newark.
That's exactly right, John. This was a major scandal under Cory Booker's time as mayor of the city, and it dates back to his time, again, 2006 to 2013. Back then, the city's water treatment was run through this commission called the Newark Watershed Corporation. It was independent of the city, but the mayor had tremendous oversight responsibilities. And in 2014, the New Jersey State Comptroller came out with this scathing report describing mass public fraud and corruption with the board members of this agency, again, that Cory Booker had oversight of. And it was just a cocktail of public corruption. We're talking kickbacks for no-show contracts, misuse of public funds, the whole gamut. This report, while it didn't directly point the finger at Cory Booker, certainly alluded to mismanagement on his part and some negligence as well.
And Luke, what do we know right now? What are we hearing from Senator Booker on the campaign trail? Because as I mentioned, the water crisis that's currently going on is not getting any better.
No, it's devastating for that community, as we know from Flint, Michigan, and other places throughout the country. It can have detrimental effects for developing brains. So the people of Newark are justifiably frustrated with this. And as you said, Senator Booker on the campaign trail has addressed this. He's calling for the federal government to step in and advocating for clean water protections for the people of that community.
Luke Brueggemann on the story. You can read Luke's great reporting up online right now at abcnews.com. Luke, thank you. Coming back into the briefing room. So remember when I said earlier the Bureau is a little abuzz, people are really excited down here? It's kind of weird. It's not because it's me. It's because of our next guest. We're joined right now by Healing House. This is an organization that works with therapy animals and service animals. They're based here in the DMV area. We have with us right now Kathy Benner and Nancy Chesley. Thank you both for coming in this afternoon. You know, we said that with everything going on right now, I mean, we've had 2 mass shootings. We've had so many. We've had a tough summer. I think that's the simplest way to say it. Organizations like yours go into areas around the country where people need help. So talk a little bit about what you do and the type of situations that you folks identify as areas where you believe you can help.
So we are a 501c3 nonprofit, and we train both service and therapy dogs. We go into all kinds of different environments. We go into schools, into therapeutic centers, into hospitals, and also into places where the things that have been happening that have been pretty tough on people. So we bring the therapy dogs, and it helps out a lot.
Jake's just a big mush.
Yeah.
I mean, I just kind of want to hold him. But like what you just mentioned is there's service dogs and there's therapy dogs. There's a very big difference between the two.
Yes, there are. So Zoe is actually one of our therapy dogs. We have about 25 therapy dog teams in our organization, and she has been specifically trained to go visit all kinds of people.
I swear, I'm listening.
Okay, we're used to it. So she visits all kinds of people. So young, old, all different shapes, sizes, and she's there to bring comfort and support to people that need it.
And as far as what these animals are trained to do, first, how long is the training? I mean, that's something that's important.
Right. So these two have actually been in training since they were 8 weeks old because they were both targeted to do this for their career. Yes.
Why is that?
So Jake is actually in training to be a service dog. So
Jake.
Yes, this is Jake. He's a Labradoodle.
Okay.
He's just over a year old. So he will either go to a child with autism or somebody that has PTSD.
Hi, guys. Don't tell my wife, okay?
or psychiatric service dog. So what we've been doing with him so far is just doing basic obedience and a lot of socialization. So he's been trained to, be okay in environments like this and be friendly to whoever is petting him.
Yeah, even someone like me. Now, what about Zoe here?
So Zoe, actually, I'll let Nancy talk. She has had a history of being a handler for therapy dogs.
Okay.
Yes.
How does that work?
I've been a handler with dogs as a therapy dog. The dog is my dog, and the dog stays with me.
So it lives in your home?
Yes.
Okay.
And then I go on assignment where Healing House assigns me clients that we visit.
Okay.
We also then follow the protocol of the facility that we're visiting and also what they want us to achieve. Some of it's purely comfort.
Yeah.
And some of it is, Zoe, let's pay attention. Sit. Good girl, yes. And some of it is what we want to do is therapeutic interactive.
Give me an example.
So an example would be with young children, such as autistic children.
Okay.
Zoe has been learning to play the piano. And
You're kidding.
No, it's a play school piano.
What can you
but
play?
she touches,
Well,
touches the keys, and then the kids sing along.
Okay.
We roll the dice.
Really?
And then the kids do jumping jacks. If Zoe rolls 3, they do 3 jumping jacks.
Wow.
And so Healing House has a great program that allows us to have the children to be interactive, but it's more motivational when it's with the dog than opposed to somebody just like myself or Kathy.
Okay, now we only have a minute left.
Yes.
Why do the two of you get involved in an organization like this? What does this personally give the two of you every day?
So my background is as I was a dog trainer first, and just was training basic pet dogs. Just saw what an amazing opportunity it was to be able to train specific tasks that help people, and I absolutely love it. Would never ever want to do anything else.
Good.
Sounds like the same story for you.
Well, I had a wonderful professional career for over 30 years and worked with a great company and had the opportunity to retire.
Right.
But I've been doing this on the weekends for many years. And so now this allows me to do it full-time as a full-time volunteer.
And it gives you such great fulfillment. You can learn more about Healing House. As I mentioned, they're right here in the DMV area, a great organization. That's going to do it for us in the briefing room. Download the ABC News app for any news anytime. I'm John Santucci. You're watching ABC News.